I never thought that a simple move to a new apartment would change my life in a way I could not even imagine. It happened in October, when the days are getting shorter and the nights are quieter, as if the city is holding its breath. The apartment was located on the outskirts, in an old but well-maintained red brick complex. Cheap, quiet, with no neighbors behind the wall, ideal for a writer like me who only wanted silence and time for a novel. But on the very first night, something went wrong. I went to bed early, tired from unpacking the boxes. The only thing that broke the semi-darkness in the bedroom was the digital alarm clock, 23:47. And then I heard it, the creak of a floorboard in the living room. That unmistakable sound, like someone slowly shifting weight from heel to toe. My heart started pounding in my throat. I froze, trying to convince myself that this house was settling down, as the previous owner had said. But after a minute, the creaking was repeated. Closer. Without turning on the light, I grabbed my phone and, trembling, went into the living room. Empty. The windows are closed, the locks are intact. There was no one in the kitchen. I put it down to fatigue, but in the morning I found a piece of paper on the table that wasn't there. The word leave was written in angular block letters, as if someone was in a hurry. Or angry. Neighbors said that the complex has been empty for a year. The previous tenants moved out suddenly, leaving furniture. The manager muttered something about an unhealthy atmosphere, but I didn't believe him. Until I started noticing the details. There was always moisture on the mirror in the shower, even though I hadn't washed for hours. There are traces of dirt on the windowsill, like from boots. And one day I found a knife in the sink that I had never owned. The blade was shiny, and the handle was wrapped in duct tape. But the nights were the worst. Every sound became a personal enemy. The creak of the bathroom door, the rustle behind the curtain, the footsteps behind the wall that stopped when I moved. I started keeping a diary, noting the time, place, and my feelings. A week later, the recordings began to be repeated. 2:14, footsteps by the bed. 3:01, someone is breathing nearby. For 17, the smell of tobacco, even though I don't smoke. One day I woke up from the cold. The air in the room was as thick as water, and there was a shadow on the wall. Not a blurred silhouette, but a clear outline of a man standing at the door. But when I turned on the light, there was no one there. Only a spot of dampness on the wallpaper, like a map of some island. I started looking for answers. I found an article from 10 years ago in the library. The body of an unknown man was found in an abandoned house on the outskirts. Crime scene photos are my complex. Victim, a man strangled with a belt. The killer has not been found. Then I bought locks, cameras, and a gas canister. But the equipment didn't work. The cameras showed empty rooms, and the motion sensors were silent. Only once, while watching the recording, I noticed how the kitchen knife moved by itself on the table. By a millimeter. Yesterday, I found an envelope without an address in my mailbox. Inside is a photo of me at the window, taken from a nearby building. On the back, "You're next." And then I realized this is not a house. It's someone who's been waiting for me, who is watching, studying, playing. And tonight, when I heard the bedroom door open slowly, with a soft creak, I didn't hide. I took the knife out of the sink and turned around. Do you know what's scariest? Not footsteps, not shadows, not threats. And the realization that you've never been alone. That someone is breathing behind your back while you sleep. I stood there clutching the knife so that my palm was numb. The door was closed. There wasn't a scratch on the glass. Only silence, thick as pitch. But the smell of tobacco became stronger. It hung in the air like the breath of a smoker, standing close. I took a step forward, and then something crunched under my foot. Photo, the one from the envelope. But now a new word had been added to the back. Why? The letters were trembling, as if the writer was afraid or in a hurry. I rushed to the window, opened it, and the cold wind hit my face. No one. There was only a trash can in the yard, bent by the wind, and the shadow of a lantern creeping along the wall of the house opposite. I went to the police this morning. The attendant, a sergeant with gray temples, listened, nodding, but his eyes remained empty. Paranoia, he said, shuffling through the papers. It's quiet in this area. I showed them the photos, the threats, and told them about the article. He sighed. That incident is a cold trail. No evidence has been established, not even the identity of the victim. I came home feeling like I was talking to a wall. I didn't sleep last night. He settled into a chair with a baseball bat and waited. The clock was ticking like a bomb. At 3:12, the bathroom door creaked. I stood up, the bat shaking in my hands. There was a light on in the bathroom. I was definitely turning it off. On the mirror, over the drops of water, someone wrote with my own shaving cream, "He sees." I brushed the inscription away with my sleeve, but something glinted in the sink. A gold chain with a locket. Not mine. Inside is a faded photograph of a woman in her 40s with piercing green eyes. The engraving on the back of the medallion was barely legible. MK 1987. It became an obsession. I searched through the archives, searched for the names of the residents of the complex, interviewed the old residents of the area. No one wanted to talk. Only the bartender in the diner around the corner, a scowling man with a tattoo of "Silence is Gold" on his fingers, muttered, "Everything is clean here. But if you find something, stay out of it." And then my neighbor disappeared. Ellen, an elderly woman from the 3rd floor who watered the flowers on the balcony every morning. Her door was open, and her apartment was empty. Only there was a postcard on the kitchen table. "Thank you for everything. Ellen." It's not her handwriting, and the smell of tobacco was in the air. I bought a dictaphone and set up traps made of thread and bells at the doors. There were no calls at night. But in the morning I discovered that someone had carefully collected the threads and put them in a shoebox. Inside is my own photo on the back. "You're almost ready." Today I found a diary in a box of books. Not mine. On the first page, he's here. He's waiting for me to break down. But I'm not leaving. This is my home. The last entry was dated a week earlier. He knows about Ellen. And about the locket. It's too late to run. I'm still here. I'm sitting in the dark with a knife in my hand and listening to the wind beating against the window. Someone is walking on the roof. Heavy, confident footsteps. They are approaching the stairs. Or maybe it's rats. Or I'm going crazy. I got up to check the stairs to the roof, but the lock was intact, rusty, untouched for years. But on the steps leading up, I noticed a tiny Marlboro cigarette, but fresh. The traces of ash had not yet had time to mix with the dust. Someone smoked here quite recently. When I returned to the apartment, I found that the closet door in the bedroom was ajar. Inside, among my clothes, was a stack of old newspapers. All the articles were about the same thing: disappearances in the area over the past 20 years. Names of victims, photos of crime scenes, hand-drawn diagrams. On the last page, someone circled the dates with a red marker. They all matched the numbers when I found the threats in my apartment. In the morning, I went to the bartender. His place smelled of beer and damp, like an aquarium that hadn't been cleaned in a long time. "I want to know the truth," I said, putting a locket with a photo of a woman on the counter. He flinched when he saw him, and for a second his fingers froze over the beer tap. "This is Margaret Kelly," he muttered at last. "Her husband disappeared in '94. She lived here until..." He didn't finish. "Until she disappeared on her own." The bartender nodded, wiping the glass with a dirty-looking cloth. "He's back," he added softly. "The one who killed her husband. They say he's watching the house, waiting for someone to start digging." In the evening, I was sitting in the dark with a dictaphone again. At 2:09, there was a knock on the door. Not sharp, not insistent, but 3 strokes, as if someone was checking to see if I was at home. I didn't move. Then a board creaked behind me, and I whirled around. There was a note on the table. "Have you found Margaret?" The letters were cut out of newspaper headlines, like in old maniac movies. I ran out into the hallway, but the landing was empty. Only the door to the apartment opposite opened slightly, and I heard a whisper, "Leave before it's too late." The voice belonged to a woman. I came home from work today and found that someone had gone through all my boxes. Books, clothes, documents, everything is scattered, but nothing is missing. Except for the diary I found earlier. There was a cassette in its place. I put it in an old tape recorder. "He's here," a man's voice croaked, distorted by static. "He's in the walls, in the ventilation. He hears your every breath. Run. Run now." Then the sound of footsteps, a crash, as if the speaker had been dropped, and silence. I'm still listening to this tape, over and over again, because at the very end, behind the noise, there is something else. A quiet laugh, and the sound of my apartment door opening that I turned off the tape recorder and froze. The door to the apartment was closed, the chain was in place, but there was a match in the hallway, right on the threshold. An ordinary wooden match, broken in half. The one I saw in the archive photo is in the hand of the murdered man whose body was found here 20 years ago. In the morning, I went to the archive of the local newspaper. The old archivist, a stooping man in glasses with a cracked lens, rummaged through the folders for a long time. "Margaret Kelly," he muttered. Yes, there was a story. Her husband, Thomas, worked as a security guard. He disappeared after his shift. There are no traces. And she... He paused, pulling out a yellowed envelope. There was a photograph inside, Margaret against the background of this very house, holding a locket in her hands. Next to her is a man in a security guard's uniform. His face was crossed out with a red marker. "She disappeared a year later," said the archivist. "The police have closed the case, but there were rumors." He leaned closer, as if he was afraid the walls would overhear. "They said Thomas was killed because he knew about smuggling through the port, about people who..." He didn't finish. A siren wailed outside the window, and the old man flinched as if from a blow. When I got home, I noticed that the lock on the bathroom door was greased. Not with my oil. It was written on the mirror again, now in lipstick, "He knows that you know." I erased the inscription, but in the sink I found a piece of cloth dark blue, like the uniform of the guard in the photo. At night, I decided to check the attic. The stairs creaked with every step, and it smelled of mold and old wood. In the corner, under a layer of dust, there was a metal box. Inside were bundles of documents tied with rubber bands and a pistol. Not loaded, but with a silencer. Among the papers are bills in the name of Thomas Kelly, transfers from offshore accounts, photographs of boxes of weapons in the port. I didn't hear him come in. I just felt the smell of tobacco, sharp, corrosive. Turning around, I saw a silhouette in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered. I have a knife in my hand, the one for my shell. "You shouldn't have dug," he said in a hoarse voice. "Now I'll have to take you out." I didn't move, looking at the knife in his hand. The blade glinted in the moonlight, filtering through the dirty attic window. The smell of tobacco mixed with the smell of rust and old dust. "You don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have already handed over copies of the documents to the police. If something happens to me, they will make everything public." It was a lie, but I saw him freeze for a moment. "You're lying," he croaked, but he took a step back toward the door. I took advantage of this by grabbing a pistol with a silencer and throwing it at him. He knocked away with his hand, but it gave me a second. I ran for the stairs, tripped over a floorboard, and rolled down, hitting my shoulder painfully. He was already on the first floor when I jumped out into the hallway. The door to the apartment opposite, the one that had opened earlier, was now standing wide open. I rushed inside, slammed the door, and slid the latch. Someone was breathing in the darkness. "Not me. Get out of here," a female voice whispered. "He can't find you." It was a neighbor who whispered a warning to me. Her silhouette was barely discernible in the corner, thin, with gray hair gathered in a bun. "He killed Ellen, and Margaret, and everyone who tried to uncover the smuggling." I interrupted. She laughed a dry laugh. "Do you think it's about guns? It's about people. He sold them through the port. A living commodity. Thomas found out, and he was strangled with a belt." The door shook from the impact. He was there. "Over here." The woman pushed me towards a window. There was a bunch of keys on the windowsill. "The basement. The door is under the stairs." I jumped out into the cold night and ran, not understanding the road. In the morning, I returned with the police. But the apartment opposite was empty. There was no sign of the woman, no keys, not even dust on the floor. The only thing on the wall was Margaret's locket, the one with her picture. And a note, he knows where you live. I'm sitting in my apartment right now, staring at the door. The smell of tobacco is here again. And footsteps on the roof. I didn't move, looking at the knife in his hand. The blade glinted in the moonlight, filtering through the dirty attic window. The smell of tobacco mixed with the smell of rust and old dust. You don't understand, I said, try to keep my voice steady. I have already handed over copies of the documents to the police. If something happens to me, they will make everything public. It was a lie, but I saw him freeze for a moment. You're lying, he croaked, but he took a step back toward the door. I took advantage of this by grabbing a pistol with a silencer and throwing it at him. He knocked it away with his hand, but it gave me a second. I ran for the stairs, tripped over a floorboard, and rolled down, hitting my shoulder painfully. He was already on the first floor when I jumped out into the hallway. The door to the apartment opposite, the one that had opened earlier, was now standing wide open. I rushed inside, slammed the door, and slid the latch. Someone was breathing in the darkness. Not me. Get out of here, a female voice whispered. He can't find you. It was a neighbor who whispered a warning to me. Her silhouette was barely discernible in the corner, thin, with gray hair gathered in a bun. He killed Ellen, and Margaret, and everyone who tried to uncover the smuggling. I interrupted. She laughed a dry laugh. Do you think it's about guns? It's about people. He sold them through the port. A living commodity. Thomas found out, and he was strangled with a belt. The door shook from the impact. He was there. Over here. The woman pushed me towards a window. There was a bunch of keys on the windowsill. The basement. The door is under the stairs. I jumped out into the cold night and ran, not understanding the road. In the morning, I returned with the police. But the apartment opposite was empty. There was no sign of the woman, no keys, not even dust on the floor. The only thing on the wall was Margaret's locket, the one with her picture. And a note, he knows where you live. I'm sitting in my apartment right now, staring at the door that I stopped counting the days. Time dissolved like sugar in dirty water. The police are no longer answering the phone. The bartender disappeared, and his diner was boarded up. The archivist died of a heart attack, the newspaper said. Margaret's locket is in my pocket, cold as a bullet. He comes every night, not through the door or through the window. He just appears in the corner, behind the curtain, at the bathroom door. The knife in his hand is always the same, with a rusty blade and duct tape on the handle. We are silent. He's waiting for me to break down. I'm waiting for him to make a mistake. Yesterday, I found my passport in the mailbox, with the date of issue in 1994, but I was born in 1985. Inside was a picture of me, Ellen, Margaret, and Thomas at the harbor. We're smiling. There is an inscription on the back, family. I went out onto the roof. He was standing at the edge, with his back to me. You don't understand, he said without turning around. It's not about smuggling. It's about a vicious circle. You write stories, but you live in an eternal scenario. Running is part of the game. I jumped on him. We rolled on the tiles. His fingers clawed at my throat, but I stabbed him with a knife, the one from the sink. He laughed, and blood gushed onto my hands. Do you think this is the end? Stop it, he croaked. This is just the beginning. He fell off the roof. I heard his body hit the ground, but there was no blood on the asphalt this morning. Just a Marlboro stub at my door. Now, I'm writing this at the station. The detective who's interrogating me looks like that sergeant, but younger. You're the only one in town who believes in these fairy tales, he says, flipping through my notes. I'm silent. Behind him, in the glass of the window, I see a reflection. A man in a guard's uniform, his face crossed with a red stripe. They're letting me go. It's cloudy outside. My phone rings in my pocket, an unknown number. Have you found the truth? A female voice asks. It's not Ellen. Not Margaret. No, I reply. I became her. Footsteps behind him. The smell of tobacco. I don't turn around. We both know that the game is on, and that next time I'll be holding a knife in my hand, and he'll be holding my passport with someone else's date of birth. The finale? This is not the final. It's just another frame in the film that can't be rewound. Just watch, and wait for the projectionist to say, "Cut." But the projectionist is silent. You have just experienced a story where the main enemy is not ghosts or monsters, but people. People who hide their secrets behind the walls of old houses, in documents from offshore accounts, in silence that seems safe. This is a story about how the past clings to the present like a sticky web. That evil doesn't always hiss or scare. Sometimes it just waits, watching you slowly go crazy, trying to figure out if the footsteps outside the door are real, or if it's your nerves. The main character, like you, wanted to believe in the rational. But the deeper he dug, the clearer it became. The truth is worse than any fiction. People smuggling, disappearances, double lives. All this was hidden behind the mask of an ordinary house. And the one who was chasing him, he's not a demon. He is the man who strangled Thomas Kelly 20 years ago, and now methodically removes those who get too close to the truth, or becomes her. The finale leaves questions. Which of them is the hunter now, and which is the victim? Does a person change when they learn too much? Or is he just becoming part of the system he was trying to destroy? This is not a story about the fear of the dark. This is a story about the fear of what lies behind the light. That we never know who's behind the next door, or whose voice whispers, "Go away," when it's too late. Thank you for staying until the end. Now check the locks. Suddenly, the footsteps behind the wall are not yours.